We've been spending a lot of days factoring now, so I want to make sure that we keep reviewing some of our old skills. So let's start by reviewing some multiplication. In the first problem, you're asked to multiply 2x minus 1 by 3x plus 4. So let's review how we do that. Remember, this is what we call a double distribution. First, we're going to have to distribute 2x to 3x plus 4, and then we're going to have to distribute the negative 1 to the 3x plus 4. So the 2x is getting distributed, and then the negative 1 is getting distributed. So now we can do those two distributions. Well, 2x times 3x is 6x squared, because 2 times 3 is 6, and x times x is x squared. Then 2x times 4 is 8x, because 2 times 4 is 8, and x doesn't have anything to multiply. Then when we go to distribute the negative 1, we need to remember to take the sign with it. So that's going to give us a negative 3x and a negative 4 when we multiply the 3x and the 4 by negative 1. The last thing we need to do is to look for like terms. So if I look in the middle here, I can see that 8x minus 3x is only 5x. So I have 6x squared plus 5x minus 4 is the answer to that multiplication problem. All right, right below that, you see another multiplication problem. It says simplify x minus 1 times 3x squared minus 2x plus 4. Push pause, take a minute to do that problem out, and then when you're ready to check your work against my work, go ahead and push play. All right, if you need to, push pause so you can take time to check each of your steps of work against my work. But once you've done that, let's actually practice one more thing we haven't talked about in a little while: classifying based on the degree and number of terms. Remember, we have 3 words related to the number of terms and 5 words related to degree. When something has a degree of 0, we call it a constant. When it has a degree of 1, we call it linear. When something has a degree of 2, we call it quadratic. A degree of 3 is cubic. A degree of 4 is quartic. And a degree of 5 is quintic. So as I look at this polynomial and I see that the highest power in the answer is 3, I would describe this thing as being cubic. That's classifying it based on its degree. Then we had a few terms dealing with how many terms there were in the problem. So we have monomial when there's only one term. We have binomial when there are 2 terms. Trinomial when there are 3 terms. And then if it has more than 3 terms, we just call it a polynomial in a certain number of terms. And we just state what the number of terms is. So when I look at this one, I see that it has 4 terms. There are 4 pieces separated by plus signs or minus signs. So this doesn't fit monomial, binomial, or trinomial. It is a polynomial in 4 terms. So that would be classifying based on degree and number of terms. All right, look up at the problem we did to start class today. 6x squared plus 5x minus 4. Pause for just a minute and name that thing. All right, I hope you called it a quadratic trinomial. Quadratic because it has a highest degree of 2, and trinomial because there are 3 terms. All right, now we're going to do a little bit more review, but this time reviewing the stuff that we've been practicing quite a bit since we last saw each other in person. Here are 2 factoring problems. The top one has a quadratic trinomial and the bottom one has a quadratic binomial. Push pause, take a few minutes and try both of these problems, and then when you're ready, push play to compare your work. I've done each of the factoring problems, both of the possible ways that you could have chosen to do them. Please push pause because there's a lot of information on the screen, and correct your work based on which way you chose to do each of the 2 problems. Then we'll go on to the problems at the bottom of the page. For the first problem at the bottom of the page, I'm going to get you started, and then we're going to leave part of it for you to do for homework. So when you take a look at 2a squared minus 14a minus 36, you should notice that when you read each of those numbers, 2, 14, 36, they were all even numbers, which means there's a GCF of 2 that needs to come out of the problem. All right, I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to leave the rest of the problem for you to do as part of your homework tonight. You can either push pause and do it right now, or you can go on with me at this time to the middle problem in the bottom. I'm going to do the middle one out all the way with you. Notice when I look at this one, these also both have 2 in common. In addition to having 2 in common, they also both have an x in common. So I'm going to use those big brackets and factor out a 2x. Well, 2x cubed divided by 2x would leave me with an x squared. Now be careful here. Negative 2x divided by 2x isn't nothing. It's negative 1, right? Because x divided by x is 1, and negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. So this leaves a negative 1 inside. All right. Now your first instinct might be, oh, okay, I'm done, because that's only a binomial. But notice that's a special kind of binomial. That's a binomial where the first term is a square and the last term is just a number. We might be able to factor this further if we put a 0x in the middle. So that's what we're going to do. Now we can try to factor what's left using our puzzle. I need 2 numbers that multiply to make negative 1 and add to make 0. Well, a negative 1 and a positive 1 would do that. So keeping the GCF on the outside of those big brackets, I can now split that middle term of 0x into 2 terms, x squared minus 1x plus 1x minus 1. And now I can group just as we've done in all the other problems. I make 2 binomials, and I look for GCFs on each of the pairs. So I've got an x squared and a negative 1x. Well, they have an x in common, and the top needs to multiply by an x, while the bottom needs to multiply by a negative 1. So we'll factor out the x that they have in common and leave an x minus 1 behind. Then I have a 1x and a negative 1. Well, they have 1 in common. The top would need to multiply by x and the bottom by a negative 1. So we're going to factor out that GCF of a positive 1 and leave behind a negative 1. All right, we're ready to take out that common binomial, which means we won't need the big brackets anymore. Our final answer will be 2x times x minus 1 times x plus 1. Okay, the last problem I'm also going to get you started on and then leave it for homework. So let's make sure we know what the puzzle's going to be. 4 times 9 is 36. So I need 2 numbers that multiply to make 36 and add to make the remaining number 12. I'm going to leave it there, and finishing this problem is part of your homework tonight. When you get done completing both of those questions, make sure to upload your work in the Google Classroom.